All right. So, like we were saying, it's Foster's Mobile Marine Service. Um, we've been, I was joined the Coast Guard when I was 20 years old back in 1988, retired in 2008 out of the Coast Guard. And I've been working in this area ever since. Worked at Sailcraft Service there for about 7 years as their head mechanic. And then we started our own business here back in 2016. So we've been doing it for a little while. We got to know a lot of good people here in Oriental and New areas, and enjoy working with you. We specialize in diesel engines. We do some electricals, some plumbing, air conditioning, and refrigeration, and so yeah. So we're here if you need any help with any of it, and yeah, and like us on Facebook. We got a Facebook page, so you can like us there. And yeah, and again, thanks to Chuck and all of them. Thanks to the Sailing Club of Oriental. Thank to the Oriental Dinghy Club, New Sailing Association, for presenting this seminar and having us to be part of it. So, and thanks Chuck, Sharon, and Dennis. All right, basically what we're going to be going over today is diesel engine maintenance and some troubleshooting. Basically, a lot of people, they don't use their boats throughout the winter. They're getting ready to start bringing them up for the season. So this is some stuff that you need to go over and take a look at before you start using the boat, because when they set up for a while, uh, they start. There's certain things you need to take care of before you start using them for the season. All right, maintenance. Maintenance should be done according to your engine's guidelines. It is designed to prevent damage and identify potential problems before they run your day on the water. Reason I say according to engine guidelines is different makes and models have different setups, what they want as far as maintenance. Maintenance, as far as how often you change your oils, how often you change your fluids and stuff. So when we give training, we kind of do it kind of a generic for all engines, but each engine, depending on what engine you have, you can always go online and look up the maintenance schedule and stuff for your particular engine. Okay. All right. Well, like we were saying before, it may have been a while since you started the boat or been on the boat to use it stuff. We're Me being in the Coast Guard and a lot of people in the military can attest to this is it's really good to have checklists, a pre-start checklist for your engine, a shutdown checklist, stuff you need to do, and keep it in a binder. That way, whenever you come down, you can pull that checklist out and just make sure you don't miss any steps, because you don't know how many calls we get, people coming in and they saying, hey, we started the engine up but we forgot to open up the seawater valve, and now we got to burn up impeller and can't use the boat and stuff. So with the checklist, this is just kind of an ideal of what to go through. You do a visual inspection of the engine compartment. Open up the engine compartment, look around, make sure there's nothing loose or falling down onto the engine or anything. Check all your fluids, your transmission oil, your engine oil, coolant levels, make sure everything's topped off the way they're supposed to be. Check your belts, alternator and your raw water pump belts if you have them. Make sure they're tightened. The pulleys, another big thing is rust on your pulleys and stuff. If you got a lot of excess rust on your pulleys, that'll start eating up your belts, basically acting like sandpaper. Um, Check your ray cores. A lot of the ray cores have clear bowls on the bottom. You can see if there's any water or sediment in there. Um, Check your raw water valve. Make sure those are open. I tell people all the time, one way to make sure you open your raw water valve is to put your ignition key on the valve handle. If you have to go there to get the key, you'll always remember to open that valve. Make sure your strainer is clean and the cap's tight and it's full of water. Check your battery voltage. If you've been gone for a while, if your shore power's been off or something like that, your batteries may be down, so you'll have to sit and check all that. So after checking everything, now this is one thing I tell people: it's kind of you don't have to, but it really helps. If your engine hasn't been started in a while, once you've checked all your fluids and everything, I would recommend either pulling the stop or hitting the stop button and cranking the engine over for a little bit. And what that's going to do is that's going to allow you to circulate the oil and get oil back into the cylinders and into those valves and stuff without actually starting the engine. Then once you do that, go ahead and start your engine. Okay. Go ahead. All right. Couple things we went over. The cooling system. All right. Most boats out there, the diesel engines have it's a dual system basically. You have a closed system, which is where your antifreeze is, and it stays circulating within the engine. And then it relies on the seawater to cool the antifreeze, which in turn cools the engine. All right. So the parts of that is going to be first thing you start off with is your seacock where your through hole is for your water supply. Make sure that, like I said, make sure that's open. The strainer, all right, that's basically there's two types that you're going to find on the boat. You're going to have the one inside, which you can clean, and a lot of people rely on an external strainer, which is just a screen on the outside. I recommend having both because even though you can't clean the one on the outside. So then it goes to the raw water pump. Again, this has got a rubber impeller in it. This is a perishable item which needs to be serviced or checked at least once a year. And you can run these for 20 30 seconds without any problems, without what in case you forgot to open the strainer. But I would definitely not make a habit of it. I always make sure you open the water valve first. Then it goes to the heat exchanger. Now this is where the antifreeze is cooled by the raw water. The raw water typically it's going to go through the two bundles that are inside. The antifreeze is going to be on the outside of the two bundles. And then it's going to leave the heat exchanger and go to either a vented loop, which is a siphon break that prevents water from flowing in back to the engine when it's not running. This is mostly installed when the engine is setting underneath the below the water line. All right. And then it's going to go into the mixing elbow where it injects into the exhaust. And what this does is this basically cools the exhaust gases. And that's why I tell people, when you first start the engine, you have water coming out the exhaust, but after it runs for 30 seconds to a minute, double check, because what happens a lot of time is there's always going to be water in that muffler and exhaust. And when you start it, it's going to throw that initial bit of water out, and then it may not be putting out any more water. So it's important to check, make sure you got water going overboard from the exhaust. All right. Now, like I was saying earlier, if you have an internal strainer and you before you start the engine stuff, you want to make sure there's water in it. Okay. Usually you can open up the seacock. If the sea strainer is below the water line, you can open up the valve, and a lot of times it'll fill itself. If it's above the water line, what you want to do is go ahead and close the seacock back. All right. Take the cap off and just take a hose or a bucket or something and fill that water up. And what it's going to do is it's going to take all the air out of the system and then put the cap back on and then open up the valve. And that way you're not starting this engine with a dry, raw water system and taking a chance on damaging the impeller. Okay. So, and like I said, usually you only have to do this if the strainer is above the water line. All right. Raw water impellers. All right, like I said, these things are perishable. They need to be checked or serviced once a year, and it's a lot easier doing them at the dock than sitting at anchor trying to do it on a hot engine. So this is one of those things where an ounce of prevention is worth everything. And like I said, there's several different tools you can use to get these out. Most people use the slotted screwdriver method, which is fine, but you got to be careful when doing that because you take a chance on damaging the inside of the housing, and then you'll put little gashes in there and stuff, and it'll reduce the efficiency of it. Best thing to do is, if you can get a puller in there, use the puller, or go with the needle nose pliers, which works a lot easier too. But at the end, you use whatever will work. A couple things you're looking for when you inspect the impeller. You want to look for like flat spots. You want to look for bent pieces, where when you pull it out, they don't come straight back out, and what happens when they sit for 4 or 5 months in one position, that's when they'll build up that memory, where they won't come back out and everything. And then if you look at the, I guess it'd be your upper left corner, the picture there, that's an impeller we pulled out of a boat. And if you find one that's missing blades and pieces like that, it's very important that you find the broken pieces within the system. And that's the reason I said, you're better off changing it before they break than to change them after they break and then have to go spend hours looking for pieces throughout the raw water system and stuff. Okay. All right. Also, this is again what I was talking about. Whenever your impellers and stuff like that break, they usually wind up at the heat exchanger. And that's why I tell people every now and then it's important, just as far as maintenance, to go ahead and pull the end caps off these heat exchangers and stuff and make sure they're clean and, clean out any debris and stuff that's in them. Because the way these systems are designed, if you get 20-30% blockage, then your engine's going to start overheating, start running hotter than normal. Okay. All right. Now, another issue we run into is, and people who have the Yanmars, you'll recognize this, is these mixing elbows. All right. A lot of these mixing elbows are not made out of, high quality metal. They're usually cast iron or, regular steel. And over time, corrosion and carbon and stuff builds up. And this will also cause water flow from the exhaust, or it'll cause low water flow, which will you'll start seeing it's like steam coming out the back and stuff. That's all indicators of restricted water flow, and most of the time, the mixing elbow is going to be the culprit. And then, so it's one of those things to where Yanmar on these here recommends about every 5 years changing these out. And then we actually found a company that actually has stainless steel ones, which has a lot longer longevity to them and stuff. So again, this is one of those things, by just being observant, you can start, seeing if you're starting to have a potential problem here. All right, I'm going to take a break here real quick, see if there's any questions on anything we've went over yet. Let's use that. Okay. Yeah. Yeah, Eric, as far as color note is okay. Yeah, they were saying there's an app, it's a free checklist, color notes, colornotes.com. But I tell people a lot of times where every boat's a little bit different. Yeah, you can still use that, but you may have to modify it to apply to your boat, your specific boat and stuff. So, thank you. All right, fuel systems. This is another biggie. We've ran into a couple of jobs this year where people accidentally put water in their fuel tank, and it makes us a mess. But basically the fuel system is really considered a closed system also, because it would just recirculate amongst itself. It comes from the pickup tube in the tank. If you notice, the pickup tube usually will set about an inch and a half up from the bottom of the fuel tank. That allows any sediment stuff to stay on the bottom. But if you're in rough seas, everybody's experienced, it's going to pick it up. Then I recommend either having a shutoff valve at the tank, and you can also put one at your primary filter. That way you can shut the fuel off. Thank you. All right, then yeah, excuse me. Now the primary filter is always a discussion on which one's primary. the primary filter, it will always be the first filter between the fuel tank and the engine. All right. Most of the time, it's a water separator, which is your Raycor, or there's other different brands out there, but you need one that's a water separator here. All right. From the Raycor, the primary filter, it's going to go usually to a fuel lift pump. This can either be mechanical, or in some cases, they're electric fuel pumps. All right. From the electric fuel pump, it's going to go to your secondary filter. These are the ones that's usually provided by the manufacturer, which is bolted right onto the engine. That's, and that's where the confusion is, because they say, well, if it's provided by the engine, it should be primary, but that's your secondary. All right. From the secondary filter, it's going to go to your fuel injection pump. And from the fuel injection pump, that's where your throttle linkage is hooked to. That's where your fuel stop is connected to. And then from there, it's going to go up to each individual injector. Now, if you also notice, though, there's another line from these injectors, and this is your return line. Diesels are designed to where they do not use all the fuel that is provided for them. Some of the fuel is used for lubrication, and others and for cooling the injectors and injector pump and stuff as it runs. And then what that's going to do is there's two different types of systems. Some of them, the return line goes back to your secondary fuel filter and then loops back through. The others has a line that goes all the way back to the tank itself and returns back to the tank. All right. And that, that's basically, they may be some that's got some AlgaX systems and different components added to that, but this is your basic fuel system that you're going to find on most diesel engines. All right. Now, as far as that system, is actually broke up into three sections. And the reason need to know the three different sections is because it'll help with troubleshooting. The first section, it goes from the tank through your primary filter to your mechanical or electrical lift pump. This is your suction side. And the reason you need to know this is because if you're running and you're starting to get air in your system, and you're starting to see air bubbles in the bowl of the Raycor and stuff, that means that you got a leak somewhere, and it's actually pulling air in from outside. That could be your cap on your Raycor if you just change your filters. It could be a bad hose clamp on a hose somewhere. It could be you're running low on fuel. You're bouncing around, and it's the fuel's getting below the pickup tube. So that's if you're getting air in the system, more than likely it's coming from the suction side. Then from the mechanical fuel pump through your secondary filter to the injector pump, that's your low pressure side. This is where you're going to start noticing fuel dripping, or you'll see fuel underneath the engine and stuff. Normally, that's when it's running. It's a low pressure. You're talking only 4-6 psi, and then what it's just going to do is just going to bubble. Most of the time, if you have a leak here, it's coming from the bleed valve on the secondary fuel filter, or the secondary fuel filter is not on tight. So that's where you're going to check for that. Now, the high pressure side is when it starts getting dangerous, because here, in order for diesel to combust, it has to be atomized. And this is where the atomization happens on the high pressure side. So if you have a cracked high pressure line or a bad injector or something, you have a potential of spraying high pressure diesel out into your engine compartment. And at that point, then it is an ignition problem. So it's important, even though it's not explosive like gasoline, anytime you have a leak in the diesel system, it needs to be addressed. You don't need to have diesel building up in the bilges and stuff and underneath the engine. Okay. All right. Now, again, we're back to the Raycor filters and stuff. The filters, if they're looking like this, okay, you need to change them a little bit more often. But also, this tells that you have a lot of sediment and a lot of growth in your fuel tanks. A lot of this here is just algae. Now, the misconception is you can put algae X or a biobor or something like that in a fuel tank, and it'll kill the algae, but it won't get rid of it. All right, at that point, it's algae X, and that is a good preventative. But if you're getting filters that look like this, then at that point, you're probably going to need to go ahead and have your fuel tank pumped out, cleaned, and start over, and then start adding your biobor or your additives at that point. And one key thing to remember is when adding your additive, you're treating the amount that you're putting into the tank. Okay, if you have a 40-gallon tank, you initially treat it for 40 gallons. If you run the boat and only add 10 gallons of fuel in, only add enough additive for that 10 gallons you're adding. If you keep adding enough for 40, at that point, you're going to mess up your fuel. Okay, so it's important, only treat what you're putting in the tank. All right, any questions on the fuel systems? All right. All right. All right. So what we're going to do is talk about transmissions. All right. You're going to find several different types. Okay, real quick. Recommended additives. All right. The ones I see out in the field a lot is stuff called BioBore, which is something we actually used to use when I was in the Coast Guard also. And I know Stay Built makes a diesel additive. I've heard really good reviews on the stuff. It helps get rid of water, helps prevent um, buildup of um, growth, and also it adds balances out the cetane. Cetane in diesel is like octane in gas. It's what gives it is basically its power. And over time, just like gasoline, you'll lose over a few years. You'll start losing what's called the cetane, and with the Stay Built and it helps keep that balanced out and keeps it stored better. So yeah, those are the two I would recommend, and that I know of. Where I don't own a boat, I really don't use any of these. So, um, any others? All right. So transmissions. All right, you're going. There's a couple different types out in the field these days. Different brands, but all of them are basically a couple different types. You have your mechanical transmission, which is the upper left hand, which that one I'm showing you is off of a Yanmar. You got the ZFs, you got the Hearths, all different ones. What these are is they're splash type lubrication. They have two clutch cones in there, one for forward and one for reverse. And what it does is it just, as it turns, it picks up the oil. Excuse me, in the casing, lubricates it, keeps the clutch plates lubricated, and they work, well. And you'll find these on a lot of smaller engines, usually up to about 55, 60 horsepower. Sailboats use them a lot because theoretically you can let these things free spin and they won't hurt anything. Even though Yanmar came out several years ago, said do not let them free spin, do not lock them. A lot of people put the transmissions in gear to keep the shaft from turning when they're sailing. They are calling saying that actually causes damage to the and wear to the clutch plates. Go ahead and let them free spin. That's the best way to do them. In the lower part of it, if the people who have trawlers will notice this one. This one here is a hydraulic transmission. This is the one that's on the picture here is actually a velvet drive. And these are the ones you'll find. These do not, they're not, they say they do not like these to free spin. And that's the reason you'll find them mostly on trawlers and stuff. Because this one relies on the engine running to pump oil through this. This is a hydraulic transmission, so it relies on oil pressure in order to engage the clutch plates and stuff on it. Very, very robust, very strong transmissions. The one up on top on the right-hand side this is the cell drives, and you're seeing a lot more of these come out now in the newer sailboats and stuff. They work very well, but they can be problematic. The problem with these is the cost of maintenance, because the way they're designed and stuff, they have components where you have to have the boat hauled and you have to have the cell drive completely pulled out in order to change the hull seals and stuff like that. But the transmission basically works the same as the mechanical transmission. It's splash lubricated, it's not hydraulic, so it can be free spun also. All right. There's a question here. Does transmission oil need to be changed periodically? Yeah. Recommend changing the transmission oil every 2 to 3 years, depending on how heavy of use. But they also, like I said, if you look at, you can pull up the specs for your engine and transmission, it'll have a maintenance schedule on there. And you also have to be aware of what type of transmission oil it uses. Some uses SAE 30 oil, Yanmars. A lot of the newer Yanmars use a straight engine oil. Some of the Volvo Penta transmissions uses 15W40. Some transmissions uses just standard red AT automatic transmission fluid. So it's important for you to be aware of what kind of oil it is, because you definitely do not want to mix them. But yes, you do need to change them. And the thing is, you're not going to hurt anything. I tell people, if you want, you can do that every time you do an oil change your transmission oil. It's not going to hurt anything to change it more often than not. Okay. All right. All right. Stuffing boxes. This is another thing I get a call quite often on, is adjusting the stuffing box. Most of your standard stuffing box is going to look like the one that's on the screen here. On larger ones, they're going to have a collar with a bolt on each side. That has the packing in it. On this one, the actual packing is in the nut itself. All right. Now, if you notice, you got the small nut in behind here. That's your locking nut. So when you go to adjust this, you're going to have to loosen that up by turning it clockwise. All right. Then the larger nut in front of that is where the packing is. To tighten it, you're going to turn it clockwise. To loosen it, you're going to turn it counterclockwise. Then once you get it set to where you want, then you tighten that small locking nut back up against the jam nut, and you're all set. Now, ideally, it says you want to adjust it to where with the shaft turning, 6 to 10 drips a minute. With the newer packing, I've seen it to where you can adjust it to where it's only 1 drip a minute. And I've actually seen it to where they don't have to drip as long as they're not getting hot. When I say hot, you should be able to put your hand on it and be able to keep your hand on it. It shouldn't burn you to the point where you have to pull away. As long as it's doing that, then you're fine. They don't have to, constantly have water dripping out of them. Another situation you run into is you need to periodically come in with a wire brush and some oil or some penetrating fluid or something, and keep these clean, because what I found is over time they get corroded up, they get turned all green and everything. And then when you do go to adjust them, you can't get them broke loose. Then you have to go to get hauled out and have it pulled and redone and everything. So it's better just to go ahead and keep them clean. Also, keep an eye on your hose clamps. Make sure they're not rusted out or anything. And the hose which attaches this to the stern tube. Make sure it's not getting dry rotted. Make sure it's all in good condition. The problem with this here is, if this thing goes bad, if the hose splits or something like that, this can sink your boat. This is allowing the ocean in. So this is very important to keep an eye on this. Okay. All right. Another type you're going to find out in the field is shaft seals. The one I have on the screen here is called a PSS shaft seal. There's a couple different variations. There's the last drop shaft seals. There's, a couple different ones. But this one here is the one I found that's most common as a replacement, because the nice thing about this is it's adjustable. Oh. And you got your different types, you got your bellows. This actually works like a mechanical seal, basically. The bellows and the graphite are stationary, and then you have the stainless steel rotor, which clamps onto the shaft itself, and that stainless steel pushes back against the graphite, creates a seal there. If these things are set up right and stuff, there's zero water comes in. The only downside to these is every 5 to 7 years you need to haul them and change out the bellows and have them serviced and stuff. But they are really good systems. All right, we'll take a quick question here. You mentioned 2 types of transmissions, hydraulic and something else, referred to them as self-lubricating. I'm sorry, I did not get that bit. It's a mechanical. The transmission you're talking about, it's the mechanical one, which is your ZFs, the ones, the little Yanmar transmissions and stuff like that. And basically they lubricated even if the engine's not running. All right. Is there a specific packing you would recommend? Carbon impregnated Teflon? The graphite ones and the Teflon ones both are good. I don't think you can even find the wax type packing anymore. But most of the time, what I see out in the field if it's sailboats, I recommend Teflon. If it's a power boat, I recommend the graphite. Okay. What is that hose bar for? A good question. That hose bar on these here, on this shaft seal, they have to be, there can't be any air in them. So the hose bar, that right here, that is designed for a vent. On sailboats, it's going to be a vent hose, which is basically a hose that goes up high above the water line. On a power boat, that is going to hook to your raw water system, and water is going to be forced into that through the engine. The reason there's a difference is because with power boats, you have the potential of going fast enough to where it'll actually pull water out of your stern tube and that thing will run dry. Even though it's dripless, it is water lubricated. Okay. All right. Exhaust systems. Now, earlier I had mentioned a siphon brake where if your engine sets below the water line. All right, this is where this is going to come into play. All right, you got your engine, the exhaust manifold. What it's going to do is all the hot gases are going to come out into the exhaust system. At that point, you also going to need water injected into that from the raw water system, which is injected at the mixing elbow. What this does is this cools the exhaust gases, because most of the exhaust system is either rubber hose or in some cases plastic or fiberglass mufflers.
I found it.
So
another email that I don't even look at.
All right, when you run that, it goes down into the lift muffler, which is a water lift type muffler. And the way this is designed is, even though looks like a big unit, it's only going to have about a quarter amount of water in the bottom of it, and then it gets pushed out above the water line and then overboard. And that's why I say it's important to look off the stern of the boat or wherever the exhaust is and make sure you got water coming out there when the engine's running, because I have seen in some instances where an engine runs without water, and by the time it overheats, it actually the Vertilift plastic mufflers can get melted from just the heat of the exhaust and stuff. So it's important to keep the water, make sure the water's going through it. All right. Now that's as far as the systems. Any questions so far on anything we've been over? All right, so this, yeah, and at the end, we're going to sit and take some time to go over questions and stuff. But at this point, we're into the troubleshooting part of it, and As far as troubleshooting goes, I always tell people keep it simple. All right. I know it's hard sometimes when something happens, your mind automatically goes to the worst case scenario. And sometimes you got to step back, take a breath. Okay, let's start off. Did I open the valve? And then just go through it systematically and check it out. So, couple things, people run into when they haven't been on the boat for a while. They'll come down and the engine won't start. And I tell people all the time, even when they call me, I'll tell them, say, hey, have you checked this and this? Engine will not turn over or turns over start or just clicks. A lot of times that goes back to the batteries. Is the battery switch on? Has the batteries been charged up? Has have the storm came by and knocked out the shore power and your batteries have down now? Another thing that will cause this is a bad ground. I've seen people say, well, I've got 13 volts at the starter, but if the ground's bad or the connections are dirty, that you ain't going to be able to get the amperage needed through there. So check that. All those are fairly quick fixes that you can check yourself. Engine will not come up to full RPM. Okay, this is a fuel issue. Some people close their fuel valves when they leave for long periods of time. So yeah, I tell people, check your valve, check your filters. Again, the Raycor, make sure it's not got water or something in it. Check your air, check for air in the fuel, make sure the filters are full. I've seen people mess up when they change their fuel filters. They don't pre-fill them or they don't prime them, and now you got air in the system. So that's stuff you need to check. Then if you know, yeah, and then if it won't come up, you're underway and it's not coming up to speed good. All right. Now some boats are equipped with the turbo on their diesel. The thing with turbos is the engine will work fine up to about 1900 RPMs. And then you notice, okay, at that point, when you try to go higher, it won't go any higher or to start black smoking real bad or something like that. That's an indication that, your turbo or your air filter's dirty. Check for a fouled prop. If you haven't had the bottom cleaned in a while, that'll cause it. Or if the boat's new to you, just got the boat, the prop could be over pitched and not allowing it to come up to full RPM. So just a couple quick things you can check. And like I said, every boat's just a little bit different. The more you do, and the more you'll figure out on your own stuff, the better off you are. And I tell people, if you've never ran into any problems on the water, then you haven't been sailing or on boats long enough, because it's going to happen. And the best thing to do is be as prepared as much as you can. Okay. All right. Now, a couple of pictures I'm going to show here of things what not to do. Okay. This is the guy asked me, he said he couldn't get his engine started, and I get on here and this is what his electrical system looked like on his boat. Again, if you're going to do it yourself, fine, but make sure you do it in a safe manner and right. This is not. Okay. Now this one, this is an example of people putting stuff on a boat and in a boat and not really taking in consideration of maintenance or the potential of something getting wrapped up in a shaft and stuff. Again, it's easy to just put stuff in there and go. Best thing to do is to get everything pulled out to the side, zip tied up, and just not letting stuff flop around, because it will eventually get caught up in the prop. All right, this one is a heartbreaker. This is a Ford Lehman that they got water in it, and what had happened was they done the sea trial, and they got underway, and the oil cooler went out on this boat and dumped a bunch of seawater into it. They came back to the dock. Nobody checked the dipstick or anything after they got back. So this boat set for about a year like this.
Oh,
And
geez.
then, yeah, at that point it was done. There was nothing. This boat, this engine had to be pulled and completely rebuilt. So, shore ties. That's another biggie. Every now and then you need to pull the shore tie cables, make sure there's no corrosion, make sure there's no hot spots or anything. Because what happens, especially in the wintertime, when people turn on heat and stuff like that, if the plugs are dirty, they'll build up heat and then they'll burn up like this. And this has the potential of actually burning the boat up too if you don't catch it in time. Oh, okay. Yes. Yeah, yeah. Dielectric grease. Like you said, take them off periodically, clean them up, put the grease on there. That helps keep the corrosion and stuff down. Okay. Please repeat the additives. Yeah, it's the first one is called BioBore. This is the diesel fuel additive we had talked about earlier. The first one is called BioBore. That's real good for killing any algae and stuff that's in there. As far as the best preventative I've heard of is the Stay Built. It's for diesel though. There's two different types. One for gas. The one you need is for diesel. That works real well as far as for keeping diesel good over long periods of time. Okay. And then this is a electrical nightmare. What had happened with this boat is they left the battery switches on, and when the boat sank, when the water hit the electrical, it just ate everything up through electrolysis and just yeah, it was a bad day. So, um, this is the important thing about keeping your bilge pumps going good and everything. All right, now this one here, this is a raw water cooled Volvo Penta engine. And a lot of the older Volvo Pentas, and you'll run into these with a lot of the older
I thought it was
diesels,
on you.
they were only raw water cooled. They had no antifreeze in them. So at that point, it's very important to kind of treat those engines almost like it's an outboard. You need to every now and then hook up a garden hose, hook up the water, and flush these things. This here is an engine that was running hot, and when I pulled, this is a thermostat housing on it, and it was just completely sludged up from years and years of never being flushed, never being cleaned or anything. So it's important to maintain, especially these raw water systems, because you got raw water going into a cast iron engine, so you're going to get rust, you're going to get corrosion. So it's important to keep them flushed. And props. All right, this guy here, every time he put the engine in gear, it would die. And then when we did get it to where it would stay running, the boat wouldn't move. So they hauled it, and this is what his prop looked like. The thing that always amazed me about this picture, if you look at the hull around it, there's no barnacles whatsoever on the hull, but the prop's completely covered. So that's always been a mystery to me. So anyway, but yeah, this is why it's important to maintain the bottom of your boat and maintain your running gear. All right. Any questions? All right. I have a sailboat with the Yanmar. I have the throttle creeping. The throttle pulls back at higher RPMs. If not sure the reason it's happened, the throttle mechanic and copy. Okay, this is a very common problem with Yanmar engines where the throttle creeps back. They do good up to about 1,200 RPMs, but when you go higher than that, when you let your hand off the throttle, it's going to creep back. And reason it does that is because there's not enough friction on the cable mechanism to overcome the spring tension in the governor in the injector pump. To fix that, what we normally do is put what's called a cable brake on it. And it's just a clamp that goes on the throttle cable. And
That's why my phone was acting up because that clamp was off that clamp.
All right. So we put the clamp on, and then you can adjust it to whatever tightness you want with it and
Heads off.
everything. That will prevent that. Okay. Yeah. Yeah. All right. So yeah, that's pretty much like I said, we're Foster's Mobile Marine Services. If you would go in and like us on Facebook. The book we have over here is the Marine Diesel Basics. This is a really good book where we got some of the slides from the this presentation we just done from it. It's a really good book. We recommend because it's easy to read. It's got great pictures in it, and it's really designed to sailboaters and power boaters and stuff who just wants to learn more about their systems and everything. And then, like I said, no, if you
Excuse me.
excuse me, and then like I said, please, if we've worked for you and stuff, you like what we've done, leave us a review on Facebook or Google, if you would, please. All right, and then again, we got other Zoom classes coming up on the 10th, the 17th, the 24th, and the 3rd. The 10th is 10 Commandments of How to Type Your Boat with John Rahm. We'll be back on the 17th going over auxiliary systems. And then John Rahm's going to be back on the 24th. And
The
then
24th on
medical,
docking.
yeah, on docking.
Undocking.
And then medical preparedness in and around your boat, how to respond. Lawrence. So yeah, everybody needs to sign up for those, and then we're going to be coming back and answer some of the questions here. All right. Thank you for your attendance today. And like I said, even I guess we're going to have an early spring this year, according to Punxsutawney. So get your boat ready. And then at this time, we're going to start going over some questions and answers and stuff. Oh, yes. Thank you for attending today. Thanks to all the sail clubs in Oriental for the sponsorship, and Chuck, Sharon, and Dennis for organizing this seminar. All right. All right. So now we're going back over here to the questions. All right. Let's see where we're at here. All right. I bought an engine cable brake from Beta Marine. Yep. You can get them from Beta. You can also order. What I've used is you can get the cable for like when you're putting cables together, the cable clamps. You can get West Marine. Sometimes they will work just as good as the more expensive ones. You just got to be careful because whenever you install these, you are cutting into the cable itself. So when you install these, you want them close to the engine, where the engine connection is. You don't want to put them in the middle of the cable. All right. All right. Can a small amount of gray smoke coming from the exhaust be acceptable? On initial startup, most diesel engines are going to have some gray smoke coming out of them. What you don't want is a sheen. If you're starting to get a sheen from the exhaust water, and if you notice when you start up, or after the engine warms up, if it's still smoking like that, a lot of times that's an indicator of dirty injectors, or it could be old fuel. If you got fuel that's 4 or 5 years old, it's not burning as efficient stuff. But no, at startup it's acceptable, but once that engine warms up, a lot of that should go away. All right, thanks. Great presentation. Thank you. Thank you. All right. All right. Is this recorded? Okay. Yes. Sharon Stevenson is recording this, and they should be able to get you a copy of it as long as everything goes good. All right. How it shows thermostat gummed up. Advised to flush the lines. How to flush the line. All right. It's important whenever you're flushing the engine like that, whether it's seawater cooled or whether it's got closed systems and stuff, and you're just flushing the heat exchanger. Most of the time, what you're going to do is you're going to just run fresh water through it. There's a couple ways you can do that. You can set and pull the hose off the through hull and stick it into a bucket of water, and then start the engine and let it pull it through on its own. If you're going to use a guarding hose to do this, it's very important to take a couple steps. You start the engine, then turn the hose on first. You start the engine, turn the hose on after the engine's running, and then shut the water off before you shut the engine off. The reason is because if you leave that water running with the engine off, you can fill up the exhaust system and fill up your cylinders and then make a major mess. So it's very important to, if you're going to use a pressurized garden hose to flush your engine, make sure you don't run it while the engine's shut off. Another thing, like I said, every now and then, every couple of years, on the people who have the heat exchangers on the cooling system, barnacle buster. Run some barnacle buster or something like that through there. That'll help keep that growth and stuff out of that system there. So Yanmar recommends leaving the boat forward gear while underway. No, Yanmar recommends not doing that. Yanmar recommends leaving. If your engine's not running and you're selling, Yanmar recommends let that shaft free spin. If you keep it in gear, what they're saying is that causes undue wear and problems with the transmission. So, okay, and now under sail, you leave it in neutral. And then, like I said, when you're motoring, you won't run it as normal. But if you're selling, they say leave it in neutral. Yanmar overheat and shuts down by design with RP. Does the Yanmar overheat shut down by design? No. What now? I say no. Now? The older mechanical engines, they will not shut down by design, unless, and I say this, if they have the electric fuel pump on them, sometimes they will run the power through the oil pressure switch. That way, if you lose oil pressure, then that engine will shut down. They do not do that with the temperature. Now, on the newer engines that are electronic, what sometimes they'll do is they'll go to a low RPM setting, which means if they go to a certain temperature, that engine will automatically start running at a lower RPM, and there ain't nothing you can do about that. That's all in the electronic design of the engine. That's just a safety device on them. Clean fuel injectors by adding additive or other methods. Yes, you can, and like you said, a lot of times these additives you can use will help keep the fuel injectors clean. But if you do have dirty injectors and it's actually smoking and causing fuel, sheen and stuff, best thing to do is go ahead and have somebody come in, pull those injectors, and have them serviced. And then at that point, your additive that you can put in there will help keep them and maintain them clean. But they don't really do a good job of cleaning them once they're dirty and stuff. Because just the sheer design of the injector itself, what it does is it's got the tip of it's got like 6 holes, really small holes in it, and it's designed to where it atomizes the fuel into a cone shape. And the reason you get smoke and fuel sheen is it's not atomizing the fuel completely, or it's only partially atomizing it, and the rest of it's just unburnt fuel because diesel has to be atomized in order to combust. Do you recommend diesel purge to fuel? Recommend diesel purge to fuel filters, clean injectors. I'm not familiar with the diesel purge. I'm not 100% familiar with that. To fill the fuel filters and clean injectors, I'm not sure. I'm not sure about that question. What recommend length of time before leaving the dock and running the engine? Length of time before leaving and returning from the dock to engine run at one rate. Okay, that's a good question. What he's asking is basically how long you should run the engine before you leave the dock And then once you get tied back up, how long should you run the engine to let it cool down? All right. What I recommend is when you're getting the boat ready, you start the engine up. The main thing with diesels, they do not like to idle for long periods of time. That what causes carbon to build up on the injectors. That causes a lot of issues and stuff over time. So my recommendation is when you're starting the boat up to warm it up, run it up to about 1,200, 1,500 RPMs in neutral. If you can, if you're tied up good and stuff, you can always put it in gear and run it up to that RPM and let it warm up that way. You're looking at about 1,500, 12 to 1,500 RPM. Now, when you come back from running it, you can let it idle down and cool down and stuff like that. And then you can just, as long as you're not real hot, you can shut it right down. Now, the only reason I'd say there's a sidebar on that is if you have a turbo engine and you've been running that engine pretty hard, then I would recommend letting it run, again, bring it up to about 12, 1,500 RPMs and let it run for about 10, 15 minutes before you shut it down. And the reason is because when you're running with a turbo, even when you shut that engine off, if that turbo's, it's still spinning, but there's no oil getting provided to it with the engine shut off. So that's why I'm saying it's better just let it cool down and let it run down on its own. So yes, but the answer to the question is about 10, 15, 12 to 1,500 RPM. All right. Do you have any experience with no, I'm not sure who that it's AJX-TCS for cleaning fuel tanks. I'm not sure who those are. We usually in this area, a lot of times, if we need fuel polished or fuel tank cleaned, we refer Mojo Marine. From what I understand, they do a really good job and they're reasonable.
That's what I'm going to do is pump my tank out.
Yeah, but I mean, if you got sludge and stuff in the tank, pumping it out, it's not going to actually clean the tank. You have to get something in there to get all that stuff out, because what it does is it sticks to the tank. Now that's really a lot of times people run into the problem because they have sludge in the tank, and then when they put the bioborne additive in there to kill the growth, now it's not sticking to the tank anymore. It's just floating around. That's when they start dirtying up the filters and blocking off, blocking up filters and stuff. Okay, BioBore JF for the additives. Yeah, I can't remember. I think BioBore is the brand name, but I know you can go online and look it up and see. But the Stay Built Stay Built, you can get that just about anywhere. All right.
I think that's what I use now.
Yeah, is there any other questions? That's all we had on the board over here. And yeah, so I tell you what, as always, we enjoy doing this. I'm glad we had a really good turnout, seems like. Hope everybody got something from this. And if they have any questions or anything or any problems, need help with anything, y'all got our phone numbers. Give us a call. We'll be more than happy to help you out. And I think that's
Darrell,
pretty much.
Hey, Darrell, this is Chuck. Hey, thank you very much. Thank you and Sharon for your time, as always. And we will see you in 2 weeks, and we look forward to it. And Darrell's already gone over the coming up seminars. So if you haven't signed up, use NCOseminars.com or whatever it is. Send me an email. Dennis Marlin right now wants to have a couple words to say. If you'll pay attention to him. I also have a list of sponsors that I wasn't able to get on a slide, but I will get these published and out to you. These are businesses around the area who have sponsored NCO to allow us to do things like this. So I'll get that information out to you. Dennis, it's yours.
Thank you. Hey, thanks for everybody for watching. And it's already February. If you're gonna make an appointment to have Darrel come in the boat, he's only got so many hands and he can only do so many a month. So the quicker you contact him, the better it is that you'll get him on the vessel in a timely manner. He's our only guy in town that has supported us all these years. So don't let the time click by.